You're listening to Catholic Family Podcast.
Thank you for joining part 3 of this series of podcasts with Father Carlos Borja and my dad. We're talking about the slow and sometimes very fast decline of culture and society here in the Western world and even in the Catholic world, unfortunately, since the times of Luther. We began part 1 speaking about the height of Christendom and perhaps the height of culture in many ways in the Middle Ages. And then in part 2, we discussed from the Protestant Revolution with Luther all the way up until the 1950s, where we brushed over very briefly the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council, which is where we're going to start today. Father Borja, thank you again for joining.
Yes, thank you for having me, Kevin.
Dad, thank you again for being here.
Yep, thank you.
And so I guess, how do you even start with the Second Vatican Council? I think Dad really ended well last show talking about how people really think we Sede Vacantes believe that there was a flip that was switched in the 1960s and that the church went from being great under under Pope Pius XII, and then a flip switched, and then it went to being just, it was no longer the church. And obviously we all know that not to be true. It was unfortunately a slow infiltration, which had been going on for the last several decades, which St. Pius X did his best to slow down and to stop. He did a good enough job that it lasted another 50, 60 years until they finally did completely infiltrate the church and create their own church at the Second Vatican Council. And that's obviously something that we need to very clearly state, that we don't believe the church failed or erred or it no longer existed in the 1960s. We believe that the Vatican Council created a new ape church, which mocks the Bride of Christ, which of course still lives on through true priests and bishops and Catholics around the world. So I don't know if either of you wants to have the first word. Where do you begin with Vatican II and how that was part of the decline of even the worldly culture?
Let me go ahead and just add real quickly here, Kevin, that I think that the real starting point here was really the election of Pope John the 23rd in 1958, because you can go into the conspiracies about that and it being you had the black smoke, white smoke, black smoke, white smoke, that whole thing go on, and they could have been a coup and all that, but really that was the moment, I think, when he was elected to the papacy, that I feel like that was the key turning point, even more so than the Vatican Council itself, that set us off onto the wrong path. And of course, the Vatican Council was when everything really kind of flowered and blew up on us. But I thought it started there.
I just add to that, if I can't remember where I read it, but it was in the file of John the 23rd that he was suspect of modernism. So that was a known fact in regards to him, and that's something that you see here, a modernist having infiltrated, and that's where, like you mentioned, just we see that turn take place.
And he is definitely speculated to have been a Freemason. I think that's it's pretty open speculation, I guess you could say. I guess I don't know if there's any actual written evidence of it, but it's a pretty good theory.
Yeah, and I'll defer real quick to Father Christoph from Russia, who's one of the world's leading 20th century historians, and he's researched Pope John the 23rd and Paul VI, and kind of our popular impression of the two. I think that the kind of the cardboard cutout impression we have of the two is that John the 23rd was kind of a doddering old man, and he kicked off the council. Then on his deathbed, he said, "Stop the council, stop the council." And then Pope Paul VI was the one who really made Vatican II happen. And his research actually kind of indicates the exact opposite. So it was John the 23rd who really was the leader of the coup of the modernists against the true church. And Paul VI then was really just kind of he was a salesman. He was a very likable, affable, friendly guy, and could sell anything. And his job was, of course, to kind of see the Vatican II Council to completion, and then to sell it to the conservatives and to sell it to the church. And so talking to him, I just got it was a little bit different impression than I had always had in terms of the roles of both those popes in the Vatican II Council.
Interesting. And I guess there are many podcasts that describe what happened at the Vatican Council, why we believe, again, that it founded a new church. We don't follow anything past 1958 and the death of Pope Pius XII. There are many podcasts for that. I can link them in this video. That's not really what this topic is about. We're not going to go delve into that. If you have any questions on that, please comment on this video or send me an email at kevin89davis@gmail.com. I will then forward it to a priest who can better answer your questions. But please, if you do have a question on that, it's extremely important. I highly recommend going and checking out videos by Father Cicada, Bishop Pivarunas, Bishop Sanborn also have many very, very good videos that describe it in absolute detail. The Radecki Fathers also absolutely incredible videos as well. So please go check that out somewhere else. While you're at it, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all of those things so that good Catholic content can get out there and we can defeat these evil cronies trying to spread bad media, which they're winning, guys. So let's try to help that out. We're not making any money. It's not a sales pitch for me to get rich. We're just literally trying to spread a good word. So please do that. So share it with your family and friends so that we can try to get a little leg up on this battle of media. And I guess so. Where I would want to go next is the Vatican Council clearly changed the church. Obviously, they took over Rome, and people in Rome who sit there now have set up a false church. So more of my question is, Dad, you maybe have a better answer for this than Father. And Father, you might too. I don't know, but Dad, you being a little bit older, what effect did the Vatican Council have on society? Do you have any feeling on that? Did it impact society in any direct or even indirect way in the years following, in the immediate years following, I suppose?
Well, yeah, I'll give a tie-in real quick. I think that listen to there's talking about a plug. There's a great my go-to audio for what happened at the Vatican II Council was from Father Hughes. I think it was Father Benedict. He gave I think it was a speech at one of the Vatican conferences. I think it's what did Vatican II really teach? Excellent. If you're looking for the authoritative breakdown of that, he talked about probably the greatest of the heresies that came out of Vatican II was redefining the term of right, R-I-G-H-T. So it said that the man has the right to worship the way he wants. And that was really probably the major zinger of heresy at Vatican II Council. Well, I think what it did in a really real sense is, of course, it infected the clergy at the time, and it affected the laity. Eventually, it affected society in kind of kicking off this anarchical spirit, because by the end of the 60s, the Vatican II Council, I think, ended in 65. By 68 or 69, you had Woodstock, you had Flower Power, you had basically a teenage group that was growing up at this point and basically losing all semblance of morality. And I think that that really, there were a lot of people at that time who thought the world was coming to an end. You had the death of John F. Kennedy in 63, and then Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. And people did think to a certain extent it was the end of the world, but it was a surge in amorality, immorality across the entire Western world that I think really was kicked off by the moral the morality that came out of Vatican II.
Right, and that being a moral ambiguity, right, which we still see today. That idea of your truth is different than my truth, right? That's what we hear today, right? It's there's not one truth, which is, of course, is God. It is whatever you want it to be. It's you. You're your own God. Everyone is their own God, and whatever you want to do is good. And obviously, if people find that, as you say, Dad, it's going to be anarchy. It's going to be craziness, and you totally saw that in the 1960s. And I do want to mention just something that crossed my mind that I feel strongly about is with America, and obviously a lot of the Western world lost part of its soul, I believe, in World War II. And I think that America really did when they dropped the bomb at Hiroshima. And I think that was such an evil thing. And I guess, people can try to argue that there was a reason for it and stuff, but it was so evil in the way they did it and where they dropped it that I think that really impacted. And I think that you saw after that, if you look into any of what happened after the war, does anyone know what happened to most of the Nazi scientists and doctors? Anybody? Most of them, half of them went to Russia, half went to America. Right. That's the truth of it. And they went and formed NASA. So your space race and everything was pretty much between former Nazi scientists, Americans, and former Nazi scientists and Russians. And that's the truth of it. Now, and I think that's where America lost their soul. And I think that hopefully not for good. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say lost it. I should say severely damaged it. That I think they were a decent country up until they dropped the bomb. And I think after that, you just saw an immediate decline, an immediate just boom. There goes the morality for the government. And I'm sure the government did bad things before, Woodrow Wilson, et cetera. But I think that to me is the line where they just, after that, they did anything they wanted all the time. They experimented on their own people without people knowing. I mean, all these different MK Ultra. Look into these things. It's absolutely bonkers. And these are things that are open to the public. This isn't conspiracy theory. The American government did a lot of really, really terrible things shortly after World War II. And I think that if you look into it too, I'm really fascinated by Kennedy, because I think Kennedy wasn't a moral person, but I do think Kennedy loved America. I think Kennedy was Trump before Trump in many ways, that totally imperfect, made plenty of bad decisions, but I think he loved America and wanted to save America's soul. I think in a way that's how I see it. And I think then they went and killed him. And then you had Johnson, you had Vietnam, and I guess that the rest is history, I suppose. And so I guess, the question then, as you go through, Dad, as you said, with the flower power, the sexual revolution, all these different things that happened in the 60s and 70s, what is the decline? How are we today where we are today, with immorality and whatnot? Are we worse now than they were in the 1500s in terms of morality or immorality? Or what is our particular moral issues, I suppose, now that we haven't seen in the past? Or Father, of course, you can answer too.
Well, I just think the whole aspect of what we're seeing in regards to just black is white and white is black now, just the whole revolution in regards to our society and in our morality in regards to just gender, for example, and things to that effect. But I think that in the aspect that you don't have so to say as many, in my estimation, as many souls to hold back the wrath of God. I think that now, or to even bring down the graces that this world needs, you see just the dam being broken, and just this flood of immorality in our society in regards to especially just the impurities that are found left and right, and just are so easily accessible to people, and just you see the world in desperate need of grace. And that's where back in the day you had at least that large amount of Catholics around the world, and now being reduced to a small handful, you sort of say the remnant, if you want to call it that, and just that aspect of not as many graces, I would say, in that aspect being brought down. A lot fewer priests offering the holy sacrifice of the Mass, and I just think that is related with what we're seeing.
Oh, 100%, Father. Yeah.
I'll give you a little theory out there to kind of see what you think. So my premise is that we've talked a lot in this series about God's authoritative structure, from him himself to his pope, to his bishops, to his priests, to his laity. And I think that is something that's an instinct he's imprinted on our souls, that we all know that in order to get through this life, to overcome our lower inclinations, to get over beyond original sin, we need that authoritative structure. Okay, so with Luther started to break it down. The French Revolution broke it down, and we started to become more and more anarchical, and to the point where by the mid-late 60s with Vatican II, Vatican II threw off more of that authority, and we became more anarchical. And so as we became more anarchical, basically we knew as a people we needed that authority structure. So guess who steps in to the void and says, hey, I got an answer? The devil does. He says, I got an answer. I'll give you security. I won't make you think. I'll let you, kind of get through from day to day, but you're going to have to give all your authority to me. And that's kind of, I think, the world we have entered into now as of the last year or two, is I think we've gone beyond this spirit of Lutheran anarchy or person-centeredness, and basically given over our authority to the devil himself.
Yeah, and as exactly, it connects exactly that. So as Father says, if you don't have the grace and the prayers and the mass and the people suffering and offering it up to God, then it's a lot easier for the devil to hold those reins, right? And for people, either if they're evil or if they're dumb or whatever the issue, to take control and to lead us into pits of immorality or even just pits of bad economy or bad health decisions or whatever it is. And I think that, as you say, I mean, who's in charge right now? Who's running the show? And obviously, worldly wise, it's not God. I mean, God, he should be. Obviously, we should be. I wish it was the case. I wish it was the church. I wish we had a hierarchy. But as you see the world in chaos and in absolute running amok, clearly people have turned away from God, and so God's not there for us when we need him. You know what I mean? Of course, God is always there. I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but I mean that in the worldly sense.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kevin. I was just going to say he won't forsake us individually, but he will forsake societies.
Right, which I think you're seeing right now, right?
Yeah.
And we've probably been seeing for even possibly hundreds of years, and when that's the case, because we've forsaken him, I mean, what do we expect? And so, I guess to understand something is to it should help us to be able to proceed. I guess what if we know what the issue is? How do we affect it? What do we do next? What's the solution? I don't want to have a show where we just moan and groan and say how bad the world is, even though it is, but I what's the solution, Father? What do we do? How do we stop this chaos? How do we stop this stupidity, or can we?
Well, the thing is that, I mean, we can make our own individual decisions and choices in the aspect of striving after sanctity, and that's what I've always told people, and you've heard me before in other podcasts that you've had me on. I say, I mean, what we can do is, on a personal level, is sanctify ourselves, avail ourselves of the Mass and the sacraments, make sure that we're living the Catholic faith, and make sure that we are doing our part in bringing down the graces that we can by means of our life of prayer, life of sacrifice. But I think in regards to society as a whole, I think the only solution in my mind and in regards to the crisis in the church is going to be direct intervention from God. But other than that, we individually have to do our part as we can.
Exactly. And individually, of course, as you say, the first step is to be more godly, try to be saints. I mean, what's the point if we're not trying to do that and trying to raise our kids to be saints? Because plenty of saints were raised in bad times. It's not like we're the only ones to live through bad times, and it's a poor excuse for us to go to hell because times were rough. And we're not gonna really care what reasons there were if we're suffering in hell. So I think that's obviously the first case. And I think that, I guess from what I see worldly wise, I mean, a lot of the issues I see are ignorance and pride. I mean, pride is the root of all sin, right? And I think that that they're connected. I think that people are too proud to admit they don't know, or maybe, they go off on these weird belief tangents and they can't go to God. I guess I think part of it's pride. They just can't overcome themselves and give up their pride and turn to God. And I think that's really important for Catholics as well. And I see that a lot. That first of all, I think it's important not to be ignorant, but it's even more important not to be prideful. I think that's so important. That, I mean, we really have to be humble. And I'm speaking for myself. Maybe I'm speaking only for myself, but I mean, it's so easy to fall into that trap of we have the truth and we know everything and whatnot. And I think that if we're going to lead by example, and if we're going to lead this world somehow out of this mess and try to find a better society and a better culture, we can only do it through humility and saintliness. And I think that's the goal we have to try to achieve, is be intelligent, try to understand what's going on and what's happened, but don't go out there banging your chest and screaming at people and saying I know and you don't, because that's not the solution.
No, I think there's got to be a certain amount of resignation to just our plight. I mean, this mess that we're in now is just literally, with this conversation, it's been hundreds of years in the making, and it's by God's. He's allowed it. It's by His permissive will. He has not caused it, but He's allowed it, and so I think that history has shown that eventually, at some point, we as mankind are going to be humbled, and once we're humbled, then I think we can come back. And kind of my message of hope. We talk about this, in our household, some that if you look at the message of Fatima, basically, I think if you see what's believed to be the third secret, it has something to do with the crisis among the clergy, and the Second Vatican Council. It's like our Blessed Mother was warning Pope John the 23rd, don't call the Second Vatican Council, or else. And the or else had to do with a loss of faith of the clergy, and it had to do with the destruction of the church. And we've lived through a lot of that. So when you think about how we have suffered as mankind, we've suffered as a world, as a church, spiritually, we've suffered mentally. Our especially in America, our environment is horrible. Our water, our food, our air, all these things. We have suffered in so many different ways that I wonder to what degree we have suffered the pains that our Blessed Mother warned us about in Fatima already. What still needs to happen, I think, is that pride, that arrogance that comes from the humanism, the modernism that infects our age, and the pride and arrogance is off the charts. That, I feel like, is the last step that really needs to come before we really have a turnaround of mankind, and that can only come from God. We can't go out and crush that pride and that arrogance. We can be the light to the world, but I think it's going to have to come from God, in my opinion.
Yeah, at least in a bigger sense. I mean, the world's not going to be saved, but I think it's a nice feeling to think that we can save someone's world one smile at a time, in a way, or the way we act, the way we behave. The world in general is only going to be saved by God, but we can save somebody's existence, their soul, maybe. I mean, hopefully, obviously, their soul is all that matters. We can save them by a good example, or by prayer, or whatever it is we're doing. And if we save, I always think if we save one soul, if I save one soul, if I bring one soul to God, hopefully after my own and my children's and my wife's, then that's enough. And then I've done an incredibly good job. And I think that's a really hopeful thought too, that everything we do, and this is something I talk about all the time, everything we do going into church, every step we take, every word we say, every letter we type is affecting somebody, and positively or negatively. And I think we have to keep that in mind.
Yep. I saw a great story recently. I'm not sure if you caught it, Kevin, but the vaccine mandates are kind of a big deal right now here in America, and I think it was the Seattle Police Department. The police, a bunch of the police got fired because they would not take the vaccine, and those policemen turned right around, got together, and fed the homeless, and basically set up a soup line to feed the homeless. And I thought, what a remarkable testament that here they're being punished for something they didn't even do wrong, and they've turned that into a virtue and something, a good deed. And there's, to me, kind of an example of, the world is a really harsh place to live right now, but we can sanctify it. We can sanctify it in our own little tiny way.
Right. And put God first and everything else will follow after. And I think that's doesn't mean we're not going to suffer. I mean, look at the saints, the greatest saints suffered the most. So, I mean, I guess we have to
run with the cross.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We have to try to carry it the best we can. And I guess part of that is, and I think that this is really something I want to end with for myself. And I'd love a final word from both of you. I think that during this time of COVID and everything, we all know what's going on. And I think we all disagree with a lot of the things. And I'm sure most everyone listening to this do too. But I think we need to stop complaining so much. I think that I understand it, and I do it too. Seriously, I understand. I complain so much, and it drives me crazy to wear a mask and all these different things. But is it helping anything? I mean, come on. You look at what the saints went through and stuff. You look at the saints in England that were being, they were laid down. They had a door put on their chest, and then rocks one by one laid on them until they died. Are we really suffering that much? I mean, maybe we will eventually, but if we're suffering a little bit now and we're always moaning and complaining about it, how are we going to be when we have a door and rocks on our chest? I think that's, again, speaking for myself, again, I complain more than like anybody I know, but I think we need to stop. That's part of the reason why I did this podcast, or the whole channel, was to not always be focused on that topic, because it's so easy to be obsessed about what's going on. And so I want to do this podcast because I think it's a interesting topic, and I think it's interesting to see why we are here. But I would just ask personally for everyone out there, don't just talk about what is annoying about what's going on, because I think it's so easy to fall into it. So easy to forget, wow, we're Catholics. Wow, we have so many cool things to talk about. Let's talk about St. Isaac Jogues, or there's incredible subject matter all the time. And all I seem to hear all the time is COVID. And that's lame. We got to get over it, get past it. And move on, try to spread good culture. And that's my point with this podcast, that the channel, I hope people follow it. Do your own thing. If it's on Facebook, I see a lot of good content these days on Facebook, people posting church teaching, they're posting good sermons. That's awesome. I mean, do that. Let's stop moping. Let's go out there and fight, bring the fight to the devil, and let's attack rather than sit back and cry and bury our head in the sands. That's my last word. Dad, let's get yours, and then we'll end with Father.
Excellent. Yeah, no, and I have to totally agree there, Kevin, that here we are, and I know I can be guilty of this, that we pray for God's will. We just want God's will. We meditate on God's will, and that's what we're really after, and we try to get ourselves in the zone of, I'm accepting God's will, I'm praying my rosary, I'm going to Mass, I'm doing all these things, and then God says, Dan, you didn't take the vaccine, you may lose your job. And then it's like, okay, well, am I still going to accept God's will, right? And that's, I think, what we really, that's the heart, change of heart. That's the heart that we have to have here, is that, yeah, if God calls us to these harder things, I'm going to lose my job, I may miss a meal, whatever it is, we've got to just accept that's his will. These are tough times. He's put us here, and he may call us to really give things up, to really sacrifice, to really live like the saints. And that might just be something we have to accept. So, yeah, no, I'm just totally agreeing with you there, Kev.
Father, last word?
I would just add that, obviously, as you're talking about tough times bring about great saints. So I think that there's definitely the aspect of God wanting, raising in our day and age great saints to meet these times, to combat these times. And I think that we definitely have that ability with the help of his grace and the help of the Mass and the sacraments. And it's just something that we have to persevere, and we pray for that perseverance, that we persevere to the end. It's something that we should ask for every day in our prayers. And knowing that despite the difficulties, like I said, you think about the early Christians back in Rome, when the church was just beginning. You see how our divine Lord said, look, you said, by this will all men know that you are my disciples. You have love for one another. And people very often suspected who was Christian on account of the great charity that they had for others and the love that they showed to their neighbor. And I just think that we definitely need to distinguish ourselves by not letting the love of God grow cold, because that is one of the things our Lord warned about. He said that in the end of times, when you come back, do you think I will find faith upon this earth? And the charity of many will grow cold. And so it is that we want to step up to the plate and do our part. And like I said, these tough times can definitely bring about our sanctification and bring about the ability for us to become great saints.
Father, perfect. I couldn't think of a better way to end it. Thank you very much for coming on these series of shows. I hope everyone's enjoyed them. If anyone has any questions for me, I doubt you'll have any for me, but if you have any for Father, please email me first at kevin89davis@gmail.com. If they're a good or relevant question, I'll send them on to Father, who I think would give his time, if he has any, in answering in them or giving them off to somebody else if they are a good and proper question. So until next time, Father Borja, Dad, thank you so much for joining, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep.